Well, to unpack our lead story on the Pietermaritzburg High Court ruling that the ANC's 2015 Elective Conference was unlawful, we're very pleased to be joined by our Pretoria studios by Professor Lesiba Tefo. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon to you and the listeners.
Professor, could anyone have guessed such a ruling on this matter?
Yes, it was within the realm of possibility, given the failure to tally of the credentials with the outcome, indeed the irregularities that were shown on the tweets and in the social media, and even the level of discontent that characterized that suggested, even prior to the conference, that something was fundamentally wrong. And with such a process, it was indeed very unlikely that it could yield legitimate outcome.
But Professor, then how does this ruling actually affect those decisions that were taken in 2015? It's 2 years later, and of course I'm sure that those people that were elected have already been in those positions for the past 2 years.
Look, the court hasn't made a call on that, and I think rightly so, because otherwise they would legislate retrospectively and that would have disastrous consequences. I think the full import of this decision would be that from today the provincial executive cannot exercise political power in the true tradition of the Westminster style. The politician can still stay outside the realm of operation and leave the public administration to run the show. But the likelihood that we might see a task team be put up, but maybe in the long run, not even in the not immediately, because once you say you are going to appeal, you lodge the papers, the import of that decision is suspended and the status quo persists and subsists.
Professor, but then what does this mean for the divisions, the ongoing divisions within the ruling party, if now one party, party members have to take each other to court to settle on political policies, party policies that were set by the party?
Well, it's a major blow to the body politic of the African National Congress. It is not in a good space right now, and it doesn't need at least contestation and contradictions of this nature. One, to some extent, I think it will be to the benefit of the Ramaphosa faction, especially because one of the main actors or protagonists in the province is Senzo Mchunu, who himself is the victim of the shenanigans of that conference. So in a small way, he's likely to benefit out of this, and by extension Ramaphosa. And this, therefore, it might weaken the prospects or the strength of the Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's campaign. But on the whole, again, it is the ANC that has lost, and not necessarily the province. And indeed, it might be call upon the national leadership to really run around across the breadth and the length of the country to try to quell the contradictions and the contestations that are there. Because in the main, it seems to be a pattern that is taking firm shape, and we may see many structures going to courts, because this will give more courage, more impetus, more reason to believe that when you are offended, when you are hurt, the court can pronounce in your favor.
Absolutely. I mean, which brings me back to this question, Prof. I mean, is this going to have any impact now, as of course the ruling party goes into the December elective conference?
It certainly will. You know, for December conference, for me there are only two protagonists there, and others I see they've raised their hands, and I think it's just strategic and tactical. I think more than 80 or 90% of those who are contesting this are very likely on the eve of the election to step aside and throw their lot behind Cyril Ramaphosa. And this outcome, I think, it will strengthen that thinking, that conspiracy that I'm trying to build. That's one. Number two, it says, as far as people's perception of the African National Congress is concerned, it has, in the court of public opinion, It has taken a serious knock today, and is likely to continue to take serious knocks going forward, especially because there are other structures that are already in courts and those that are contemplating going to courts. And with this decision setting a precedent, indeed, it might not even be too difficult for a local magistrate, regional magistrate, or even the high courts in certain areas to take a decision.
And Prof, do you think this ruling actually signifies or restores the credibility of our judiciary? And of course, what lessons can the ANC as well as other political parties in the political sphere in the country learn from this decision? I mean, we've just come from the Kenyan ruling, a Supreme Court ruling that nullified a whole election.
It's extremely unfortunate that the South African court finds itself besieged seized with matters quasi-political.
Internal,
but
yes.
At the end of the day, is the last line of defense of our democracy and our rule of law. Therefore, when people are aggrieved, they have to go there. But I think the problem is with the political leadership. Because if they dealt with the contradictions, the challenges within themselves, within the confines of their constitutions, subservient to the national constitution, we wouldn't be seeing our courts really dealing with some of the matters they are forced to deal with. But some would argue it's a maturing democracy, and in the course thereof there will be contradictions. With time, we might find ourselves behaving like other countries, especially Botswana, Mauritius, whose democracies have matured to a point where people will take political responsibility and step down without challenging, without cause.
Absolutely.
Decisions that are clearly not in national interest or even in their party political interests.
Prof, thank you so much for that sound analysis. Of course, that is Professor Lesiba Tefo joining us from our Pretoria studio. They're deliberating the merits of that court ruling. Of course, the court in Pietermaritzburg ruled in favor, of course, of the respondents in the case against the actual party management structures, the ANC.